October flew past. Barry Riff's shows were a huge success, selling out each town. November brought more of the same. Between two shows, Don and Haley hustled to LA and sat in the audience watching the next new pop phenom and his band win the Best Rock Group award. They were back in the hotel in St. Louis so fast it made Don's head spin. He wasn't sure his eyes would ever recover from the flash bulbs. Don sat on the couch waiting for the band to arrive for their usual pre-concert get-together. The tour was going well. The music was as good as it had ever been, maybe even better. Don was picking his guitar and thinking, mostly about the awards show and that dress. Damn, he thought to himself. There was no doubt that Haley Marshall was a beautiful woman, not that there had been before. Did he really want to get involved with her? Their chemistry on stage was phenomenal. Would an offstage romance kill that? Charlie knocked and entered, smiling as he saw the contemplative look on Don's face. Interesting riff, Axl. Don looked up. Not mine, however. Yeah, I recognized it. The Hollies, right? Uh-huh. Haley's dress wasn't black, Styx said, smiling as he sat down next to his friend. Well, sue me. Wes arrived smiling and nodding to the beat. Don hadn't stopped playing. You got the right song, Axl. I saw some of the show. They showed you arriving with Haley. That dress was something. She's been holding out on us. Haley knocked on the open door and walked in. Long, cool woman in the blue dress. Wes intoned as Haley entered. Charlie started laughing as Haley blushed. Oh, come on, guys, it wasn't all that. No, I think this one's more appropriate, Don said, strumming some chords. Charlie laughed and began to sing, Devil with the blue dress on. Axl. Haley squealed, crossing her arms over her chest. Okay, Don said, smiling. Enough of that. Don looked serious for a moment and then stood up. You looked fabulous last night, Haley. I didn't tell you that often enough. Thank you for agreeing to go with me. Haley smiled. It was sort of fun, except for all those flashes. At least Morty should be happy about that. The door closed and Morty walked in. He wasn't smiling. He set his briefcase down as Don sat back down, pulling Haley down beside him. So, do you want the bad news or the worst news? Morty asked Don. Don shrugged. Morty opened his briefcase and laid 4 tabloids on the coffee table in front of Don, Haley, and Styx. Wes was over by the window, talking to Lindsay on the phone. Styx whistled as he picked up one. Barry Riff tour one giant sex orgy, Styx read. You've been holding out on us, Axl. You've got to be kidding, Haley shrieked, after reading the headline on another of the magazines. Don looked down and shook his head. Barry Riff's newest member warms up Axl before the shows, the headline screamed. Seems like I'm the one who's been missing out, Don said, winking at Styx. Haley whirled and glared at him. What the hell is wrong with you, Axl? Oh, come on, Haley, surely you don't believe there's any substance to any of these? But nothing. If you read the stories, you'll find that an anonymous source that could never be found hinted at something that they've sensationalized. I knew this would happen. It certainly explains the message I had from Mama this morning. Mama reads this one. Oh. Don looked serious for a moment. Are we doing a show anywhere near her? Yeah, Tuesday, St. Paul, Haley said, a little confused. Call her, and your dad. We'll be in town by noon. I'd like to take them to lunch and give them an opportunity to see you backstage. And show them that the tabloids are a little less than truthful. Haley nodded. Maybe that would work. She already had tickets for them to see the show, but she wasn't sure they'd come. Okay, Morty, lay the worst news on me. Morty frowned. He opened his briefcase and laid a folder in front of Don. John filed his suit yesterday. He's asking to be given control of the Barry Riff name and the copyrights for all songs written since the inception of the band. He has affidavits and depositions from over 100 people who support his claims. Ted Hargrove has seen some of it and says it's well laid out. He sent the key stuff for you to look over. Christmas break is not going to be much of a break. Damn. I'm sorry, Axl. I thought we had things worked out before the tour started. Ted said he would go through everything and be ready to start working on our case when we get back. Thanks for handling this, Morty. I appreciate your letting me focus on the tour. I'll wade through this stuff and talk to Ted tomorrow on the bus. Now, I think it's time to forget our little problems and rock St. Louis. I'm in, Styx said, tossing the tabloids into the trash. The St. Louis concert was sold out. 22,000 people jammed the Savvis Center to rock with Barry Riff. The show was a huge success. After the show, the media folk were all over Don. Haley suddenly found herself garnering a bunch of attention as well. Between the rumors of their affair and the lawsuit, there wasn't much talk about the music. That annoyed Don. Morty found him after the last reporter was ushered out. The music's getting lost in the bullshit, Morty. I was afraid of that, Axl. Any ideas? Maybe. Think you could talk Crystal Lane into riding with us from St. Paul to Chicago and doing an interview and maybe a feature on the Chicago shows? Are you sure you want Crystal? What about Lacey Marks? She's usually fair, and she's wanted to do something on air for a while. Give Crystal first shot. I owe her that much. If she balks even the least, you can go to Lacey. You got it, Axel. Now call Cassie. She's been calling every 10 minutes. I think she's going to burst if she doesn't reach you. No sooner than he opened the phone, it rang. St. Louis summer home and summer not, Don said. Oh, Daddy, Cassie giggled. So what is you calling me every 10 minutes, Cassie? Oh, Daddy, I had the most wonderful date tonight. Cassie gushed. Date? What? Who? How come I'm always the last to know? Are you done? Cassie giggled again. I didn't tell you because I was afraid it would be as bad as the last one. Jenna and I went out with Tommy and Bradley to the movies last night. And did this frog get a kiss? Don teased. He's not a frog, Daddy. At least I don't think he is. He was nice. I think he was even more nervous than me. So I shouldn't be sending Uncle Guido to break his kneecaps, then? Don't you dare. He has to play basketball tonight. Okay, but his head does fit in doorways, right? Yes, Daddy. I had a good time and I kissed his cheek when we got to the door. Is there a second date in the future? I sure hope so, Daddy. Good. I'm glad you found one of the good guys this time, Cassie. Me too. One more week and then you are home, right? We should be back in town next Monday. Haley was visibly nervous as she waited in the lobby for her parents. Don watched from his seat on one of the many couches in the lobby. He was still reading through the papers on John West's lawsuit. Haley was pacing back and forth between the front desk and the couch that Don was sitting in. Save some of that energy for the show tonight. Haley, Don said, shaking his head. Oh, shut up, you, she said, smiling before turning back to the door. Don watched as a distinguished-looking balding man strode confidently into the hotel. A rather severe-looking woman walked at his side. The woman almost smiled as she saw Haley. Haley smiled and walked toward the couple. Mama, Daddy, it's good to see you. Don watched as Haley hugged her mother and father. He put the papers back into the folder, closed the briefcase. He handed the briefcase to Morty, who had just come down to the lobby. Crystal jumped at the idea. Axel, Morty said, accepting the briefcase. She'll be here in time for the show tonight. Good work, Morty. Take this up to the room for me, please. My lunch dates are here. Morty nodded and turned back to the elevator as Haley stepped up to Don with her parents. Mama, Daddy, this is Don Woodson, the leader of Berry Rift. Don, my parents, Marie and Andrew Marshall. Pleased to meet you both, Don said, extending his hand. Both parents nodded and Don dropped his hand. I made reservations for us at Kincaid's. Our car is waiting. Lunch was not a great success. The food was excellent, but Don wasn't comfortable. Mr. Marshall hadn't said more than a dozen words to him the entire meal. Haley and her mother chatted amiably throughout the meal. Don was glad to see her mother smile. His first impression was wrong. She was not severe, but she was clearly very reserved around him. After lunch, they went to the Excel Energy Center to do a sound check and practice a bit. Mr. Marshall didn't seem very interested in going, but Mrs. Marshall convinced him. Haley talked with her parents while they watched Don and the crew finishing things up. Don watched as Styx shook Mr. Marshall's hand and hugged Mrs. Marshall before joining Axel on the stage. Don accepted his guitar from the roadie and stepped up to the microphone. Okay, Haley, let's get this going. Haley waved at him and began moving away from her parents toward the stage. Don turned and looked at Styx and Wes. When he had their attention, he began playing one of their favorite cover riffs, Roy Orbison's Pretty Woman. Wes and Styx smiled as they joined in. Cut that out, Axel, Haley said into her microphone as she sat at the keyboards. Ain't nothing but the truth, Wes said into his microphone. Okay, let warm up with Love's Sweet Pain, Don said. Styx clapped his sticks together in a 4 count, and the band began to play. The sound check lasted half an hour as they played through 6 songs. One more, Don said. Let's do Lost Without You. The sound was perfect. The rehearsal went well. Even Mr. Marshall seemed impressed as they headed back to the hotel. 18,000 fans rocked with Berry Rift that night. And after the show, the Marshalls were more than polite in their praise for the band. You guys really rocked, Crystal Lane said, walking up to Don. You don't seem to miss Key West much. How are you, Crystal? Don asked as he guided her away from Haley and the Marshalls. Been better, been worse. Look, Donnie, Crystal said, putting her hand on his arm. I'm really sorry about how things turned out with your wife. I was a bitch. I couldn't believe it when Morty called and asked me to do this interview thing. I didn't think you'd want anything to do with me after the way I treated Jessica and then the Key West interview. Don't worry about it, Crystal. I didn't handle things well before. I'm sorry that I let our relationship get so bad. Now let's talk about what I want and see if we can make this work, okay? Sure thing, Donnie. The 2 weeks between the Midwest swing of the tour and Christmas blew past Don in a hurry. Even Christmas came and went in a flurry of activity. Wading through the over 100 affidavits in support of John West's lawsuit, Don and Ted Hargrove poked more than a few holes in the case. The whole legal process mostly served to exhaust Don. Cassie, Jenna, and their boyfriends were constant visitors in Don's house. Don didn't find much time to spend with them, unfortunately. Between wrapping up the television special with Crystal Lane and the lawsuit, he didn't spend much time with anyone. Christmas Day had been good. Presents were exchanged, family and friends visited, and by the end of the day, Don again felt himself exhausted. It wasn't until he woke up the following Saturday to a quiet house that Don realized he had nowhere he had to be that day. The morning air was crisp as he stepped out onto the deck with his cup of tea. The remnants of a Christmas snowfall still covered most of the ground behind Don's house. He smiled as he stared out into the distance. "Merry Christmas, Jesse," he said quietly. "I'm sorry I didn't take the time earlier. It's been so busy." He could almost feel the presence of his wife in the cool air around him. For 20 minutes, he stood with his arms on the railing, talking quietly to her, telling her everything. And then he sighed. With one last look, he walked back into the house. It was time to start getting on with life, starting with the New Year's Eve party. Don knew that everything was set. The guest list was complete. A dozen or more of Cassie's classmates and friends were coming, as were Wes and Lindsay, Charlie and Robin and their brood, Haley, the rest of Monster, Crystal Lane, Morty, and several dozen other friends and acquaintances. The food, drinks, and party favors were all set. Don made a mental note to thank Lindsay and Robin for helping him get everything together. Most of all, Don realized that he was looking forward to seeing Haley again. She'd gone to St. Paul to spend Christmas with her family right after the tour ended. The party had been in full swing for a couple of hours when Don finally found a moment to breathe and get a much-needed drink. He smiled as he downed a long swallow of the ice-cold beer. It was good to see Crystal having fun outside of work. Her new boyfriend, Keith something, was a good man. Don liked him instantly. Every time Crystal tried to talk about business, Keith had gently steered the conversation back to something else. Crystal didn't even flinch. In fact, after the second time, she pulled Keith's face down to hers and kissed him. Don had always known that Crystal wasn't the bitch most people thought she was. He just never knew how to channel her ambition. Keith apparently did. He took one more swig of beer and looked around the room. The teenagers had made themselves scarce. It's time to be a dad and make sure things aren't too out of control, he thought, setting the empty beer bottle in the bin. Don knew just where to look for the kids. Cassie told him they were going to the game room. So he wandered down the hall toward the room. "Bradley, not now," Don heard Cassie hiss before he turned the corner. Don stopped and took a deep breath. Everything in him wanted to rush around the corner, but he knew he could not until he was sure of what was going on. "Come on, Cassie. It's not like I haven't seen this before. Someone will see, Bradley. Please, let's go back to the game room." "Don't tease, Cassie." Don heard enough. He bumped his elbow against the wall. "See, Cassie?" she hissed. Don turned the corner just in time to see Cassie push past Bradley and head back into the game room. "Bradley," Don said, smiling. "I just came down to check on you kids." "Oh, hi, Mr. Woodson. Axel. We're doing fine, really. I want to thank you for inviting me. It's a great party." "I'm glad you're enjoying yourself," Don replied. "I've been a bit busy lately. I was hoping to get to know you a little better during this break." Bradley nodded nervously. "Walk with me for a moment, Bradley." "Okay," Bradley squeaked. Don noticed Cassie peeking from the game room door, but deliberately ignored her as he led Bradley down the hall and out onto the patio. Don paused at the rail and turned back to Bradley, assessing him for a moment. Bradley was tall, just over 6 feet, with a solid build not overly muscular, but more like a basketball player. "So, Bradley, tell me, what are your plans?" "Plans, sir?" "Yeah, are you going to college? What do you want to be when you grow up? How do you see Cassie fitting into your future?" "Just the usual stuff us dads want to know about our daughter's boyfriends." "Fit into my future? What?" "Relax, Bradley." Bradley took a deep breath. Don smiled, remembering when he had been in the boy's shoes. He borrowed a speech he had once heard, the one every dad seems to give. "Okay, let's start over." Bradley nodded. "Are you planning to go to college?" "Yes, sir. I want to study architecture." "Good choice. Any reason?" "I like figuring out how to put things into buildings. My dad and uncle are architects, and I work for them during the summer." "That's great. Now, about Cassie. How does she fit into your plans? A serious relationship? Just a fun time?" Bradley hesitated. "I don't really know how to answer that, sir. The truth is always best, son. The truth is, I don't know how she fits into my plans, sir. I've only been dating her for a month, and I like her a lot, but I'm not sure what the future holds." "Good answer, Bradley. I appreciate that. Did Cassie tell you about her mother and me?" "She said you didn't know each other until a couple of months ago. We dated in high school. We were serious for a while. One thing led to another, and Cassie was born. Fate kept us apart for 15 years. "That sucks," Bradley muttered. "That's life, Bradley," Don said. "Did Cassie tell you about her date with Bobby Jones?" "Yes, sir. Cassie said you're pretty smart." Bradley was confused. "What?" "That was my elbow hitting the wall outside the game room," Don said, chuckling. Bradley's face flushed, but Don kept his tone relaxed. Relax, Bradley. Nothing happened. I'm just concerned by what I heard. It sounded like you were pushing Cassie to do something she wasn't comfortable with. I understand you two are exploring, but there's a point where you have to respect her boundaries. I'm sorry, Mr. Woodson. I think you owe someone else an apology. You're right. Should I leave? No, Don said. I trust you're the kind of person Cassie believes you are. Yes, sir. I should probably. Why don't you wait here for a moment? I never did make it to the game room. This deck is a good place for private conversations. I'll send Cassie out to you shortly. Bradley looked a little confused but nodded. Cassie was waiting at the door when Don turned back down the hall. Where's Bradley? You didn't kick him out, did you? Was there a reason I should have kicked him out? Don asked, raising an eyebrow. Well, I thought you might have heard. Don raised an eyebrow. Cassie? She blushed. You're not going to make this easy for me, are you, Dad? Don shook his head, smiling. Cassie, you can tell me anything. I'm not here to judge you. I just want to make sure you're okay. Cassie took a deep breath. Okay, here it goes. I let Bradley touch me the other night, and I liked it. Is that okay? Don nodded. It should feel good. But what's bothering you? What's the real issue? Just then, Bradley stepped out from the shadows. She's worried that you heard me trying to push her into doing something she wasn't ready for earlier. Cassie turned to see Bradley, eyes wide. She instinctively moved to step between them, but Don stopped her. They both looked at each other for a long moment before Don nodded. I'm sorry, Cassie. I shouldn't have pushed you. I understand now, and I'd rather stay and enjoy the evening with you if you'll let me. Cassie looked at Don. He's your boyfriend. Do you want him to leave? No, she said firmly. Don smiled and waved Bradley over. He gestured for Cassie to join them, and she kissed Bradley on the cheek, both of them blushing. Well, now that the crisis is over, maybe we should rejoin the party? Don said, smiling. Midnight was fast approaching. Don walked back to the game room and coaxed the teenagers to join everyone in the living room. Haley smiled as she stepped up next to Don. 5. Haley grabbed Don's arm, drawing his attention away from Cassie and Bradley. 4. She smiled as his eyes turned and met hers. 3. Haley pushed herself up on her toes and put her hands on Don's shoulders. 2. Haley closed the space between their lips. 1. Their lips touched together as everyone began to cheer. Don saw Haley's eyes close as the electric touch of her lips rocketed through him. His arms automatically landed on her hips, pulling her into him. He felt her fingers move across his shoulders and behind his neck. The kiss deepened as he leaned forward, allowing Haley to drop off her toes. The kiss continued until Don felt a hand on his arm. He reluctantly pulled back from Haley to find Cassie standing there. He reached out and pulled her to him, kissing her cheek and hugging her tightly. He reached behind her and shook Bradley's hand. Happy New Year, Cassie, he said as he released her. When he looked around, Haley was gone. Surely he hadn't imagined. Everyone was hugging and congratulating each other. Don waded through the crowd as people stopped him to thank him for inviting them to the party. People began to leave. Don was getting frantic. Cassie, have you seen Haley? Not since she kissed you. Why? I need to talk to her. If you find her, will you keep her here until I can find you? Sure, Daddy. Finally, the crowd thinned. Styx and Wes and their various charges were the last out the door. Bradley was kissing Cassie at the door before heading out himself. Don looked around. The house was empty. Where had she gone? Good night, Daddy. Happy New Year. Cassie called as she headed back to her bedroom. Damn, Don cursed to himself. He hadn't found Haley. He locked the front door and began picking up some of the empty plates and cups and headed for the kitchen. Don could hear water running as he approached the kitchen. I thought you went to bed, Cassie, he said as he turned the corner into the kitchen. It wasn't Cassie. Haley shut the water off and turned to face him. Haley? In the flesh. I thought you'd left. I wanted to. Don found himself at a loss for words. Wanted to what? She asked as she wiped her hands on a towel. She stepped toward him and stopped before they were touching. I wanted to talk to you about that kiss. What about it? It was, amazing, Haley answered before he could. I think incredible might be better. But it was also unexpected. Haley turned away and put her hands on the counter. Unwanted. No, Haley, not unwanted, he said, settling his hands on her hips. I'm not sure about a lot of things, but it wasn't unwanted. He gently turned her back to face him. She was so beautiful, he thought as he stared into her eyes. Haley, I'm not sure I can be what you want me to be. A lump the size of Texas suddenly appeared in his throat. I don't know what you mean, Don. I mean, it was a Happy New Year kiss. Don watched her eyes drop. Well, it sure felt like more than that to me. Haley, Don admitted. Did he dare go further? Haley frowned slightly, sighing. Well, that's all it started out to be. And then, fireworks? Don suggested. Something like that. I guess now would be a good time to say that I missed you while you were in St. Paul. Haley nodded. I didn't really notice until Saturday. John's lawsuit kept me pretty busy until then. It hit me Saturday morning as I was standing on the deck staring into the snow. Dawn smiled and reached out to Haley. I'm not sure of much of anything right now, Haley. That kiss opened up something, and I think I'd like to see where that door leads. Haley smiled and looked up into Dawn's eyes. Me too, she whispered. Now, kiss me again so I can get out of here before we get ahead of ourselves. Dawn leaned forward and captured her lips with his. All conscious thought flew away as the kiss deepened. Dawn felt the world narrow to just the two of them. His heart raced as the feelings behind the kiss surged through him. When their lips reluctantly separated, they were both panting. They clung to each other for a moment as they sought their balance. See you Monday at rehearsal, Haley said softly, gently disengaging from Dawn's arms. Dawn nodded as he walked behind her to the door. Sweet dreams, Haley, he said as she quickly kissed his lips and disappeared into the night. So, Cassie said, setting her glass of orange juice down on the table, and then sat next to Dawn. So, Dawn replied, you and Haley, huh? Haley and I what? I don't know what. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you were digging for, Cassie. And I'm not sure what is going on between Haley and me either. Okay, is there some point to this conversation, other than to completely confuse me? Dawn asked. Cassie took a drink from her orange juice. Well, I didn't go straight to bed last night. I kinda saw you two in the kitchen, and I wondered about it. Are you worried about how things would change if Haley and I did get involved? I guess. Dawn took a long drink of his orange juice, and then turned to face Cassie. He put his hand over hers. You will always be my daughter, Cassie. Nothing that anyone does will ever change that. No one can take your place in my heart. I will be there for you forever. I know nothing can ever make up for the 15 years I missed out on. And I promise you no one will ever replace your mother either. Neither in my heart, nor in your life. Now that said, I feel a spark of something with Haley. It is always possible that we will both discover that it is more than a spark. If you follow that to its ultimate conclusion, we may get married someday. And if that were to happen, you would still be my daughter. You will still have a place in my heart, my life, and my house. I will not let anyone take that place from you. Does that help? Cassie hugged him tightly. Yes, Daddy. That being said, how do you feel about Haley and me? I like Haley. And me? Ah, Daddy, you know I love you. And the two of us together? I guess I could get used to it. How about you and Bradley? Dawn asked, turning the tables on Cassie. What do you mean, Daddy? Are you too serious? Serious? Dawn took a moment and thought about how to phrase his questions better. Do you like Bradley? Of course. Do you see yourself marrying Bradley someday? I don't know, Daddy. I dream about that sometimes, but we're only 16. I understand that, sweetie, and I'm certainly not pushing you to get married, but you should probably think about where you want to be in 5 or 6 years and see if Bradley still fits into your plans. If he doesn't, it probably isn't in your best interest to get too involved physically. Cassie blushed. Someone will be your first love, your first lover, and your first heartache. Cassie, I know this. I wish I could promise you that life was easy. Mom and I had a long talk about this before she died. She said the same things. Good. Dawn patted her hand. I know I can't replace her, but I hope you always feel you can talk to me about anything. Cassie smiled. I better get ready. Bradley's taking me ice skating today. I'll be back for dinner. I'll be back then too. I'm going to hit the practice room and see if I can finish fleshing out some new tunes. If you two get bored, drop by. Okay, Daddy. Cassie kissed his cheek and raced down the hall. Cassie was still back in her room when the doorbell rang, so Dawn wandered out and opened the door. Good morning, Bradley. Hello, Mr. Woodson. Is Cassie ready? Not yet, son. Come on in. Dawn ushered the young man in. So what's the plan for today? Cassie and I are meeting some friends at the Ice Palace. I have practice at 4, so I'll drop Cassie off here about 3. Daddy, was that the door? Cassie asked as she entered the front room. Oh, hi, Bradley. You kids have fun, Dawn said, smiling. Call me before Bradley brings you home. Cassie, I may still be at the practice room. Maybe he can drop you off there. Okay, Daddy. Bye. Bradley put his arm around Cassie's waist as they headed out the door. Boston, Philadelphia, Charlotte, and the rest of the 20 cities on the East Coast leg of the Barry Riff tour all melted into one continuous concert for Dawn. They finished one show, packed up, and slept as they headed for the next venue. During the afternoon, while the roadies set up the stage, Dawn was on the phone with Morty and Ted Hargrove. Morty and Ted were trying to get an out-of-court settlement negotiated. John can have the rights to every song he wrote or sang, Dawn said. But his claims to Lost Without You, Love Sweet Pain, and the songs on the first album are bullshit. Haley watched him from across the bus. Tonight's show in Atlanta was to be the last on the tour. Dawn had been distracted for most of the East Coast swing. The music was beginning to suffer. She heard it last night in Miami. Dawn missed a whole verse in Love Sweet Pain. Give him the income for producing the albums, Ted. He'd do some of that. We all did. But if that will get him off the rights to MY songs, do it. Okay. I'll be back in Central City in 2 days. See if we can get John and his people into a conference room, and let's get this settled. Don closed the phone and leaned back in the seat. This legal stuff was getting to him. He had no energy. He was tired again, and before he knew it, he was asleep. He's doing too much, Styx, Haley said as she watched Don stalking around the arena, talking on the cell phone again. Styx nodded. The music is suffering. Yeah, Axel missed a verse last night. Bass chimed in. I'll see what I can do, Styx said. But I don't think it will do any good. Let me take a shot, Styx, Haley said, nervously. Are you sure? Bass asked. Don't mess things up between the two of you. Haley, Styx said softly, putting his hand on her shoulder. I saw that kiss at New Year's. I'll talk to him. Thanks, Styx, but I want to do this. If it messes things up, then they were already messed up and I just wasn't seeing it. We need to have fun tonight. You two go grab some dinner. Both Styx and Bass looked hard at her, but Haley held her ground. Finally, they wandered off in search of the perfect fried chicken dinner. I'm telling you it has to be that way, Morty, Don said as Haley walked up beside him. 2 more minutes, Haley, Don said, covering the mouthpiece. Say goodbye, Don. What? Haley reached up and covered his hand with hers. Say goodbye to Morty, Don. Either you end the call, or I will. Don ended the call, and the turn on Haley. What the hell was that all about, Haley? That call was important. You have no right. That call was not important. Not tonight. Tomorrow, maybe, but not tonight. The music is important tonight, Don. This is our last show. We need you there tonight. Not half there, not worrying about what John is doing. We need you on stage with us tonight. You weren't there last night, but you will be there tonight if I have to take that damn phone and smash it. What the? Save the self-righteous act, Don. I may not be a permanent member of the band, but the show reflects on me too. And last night reflected badly on all of us. Last night we were the Barry riff that John predicted we would be. We were out of sync. We missed notes. Hell, you missed an entire verse. It can't happen again. I won't stand for it. Just who the? Shut up, Don. This is for your own good. Give me the cell phone, go get on the bus, put the seat back, and take a nap. I'll wake you in time for the show. Don started to say something, but stopped when he saw the determination in her eyes. With an exaggerated sigh, he handed her the cell phone and walked off toward the bus. Hey, Axel, Bass yelled as he saw his band mate head toward the bus. Don frowned but stopped. Styx found the best place for fried chicken. Want to join us? Bass asked as Styx drove up in a cab. Why not? Don replied. The ride to the restaurant was quiet. Luckily, the restaurant wasn't far from the arena, and they were quickly seated. Styx and Bass could both see that Don was annoyed. They waited patiently for the storm that was plainly on the horizon. Just who the hell does she think she is telling me to get off the cell phone and go rest? Who is the leader of this chicken outfit, anyway? I am. The show last night was fine. I mean, sure it wasn't our best, but it was fine. Wasn't it? It was schlock, Axel, Bass said. Don stared at him surprised. Then he turned to Styx. Well, some of us were fine, but the guitar player pretty much sucked, Axel, Styx said. Don stared at his two friends. Styx and Bass smiled. They had boxed him into the middle of the booth. He couldn't get out without at least one of them moving. Oh, come on, it wasn't that bad. If my friend Axel Woodson had heard that guy, he'd have fired his butt, Styx said sternly. ET2, brute? Don frowned. Seriously, Axel, you gotta stop. This lawsuit bullshit can wait one more day. We need you there tonight, not just the guitar. We need Axel Woodson, leader of Barry Rift. Don looked back and forth between his friends. The waitress came and took their order. The meal even showed up before he said anything. Charlie and Wes chatted about life back in Central City while they waited and ate. Don finished his entree and pushed the plate back to the middle of the table. I'm going to walk back to the arena. Charlie, take care of my tab, please. Styx nodded and led his friend out of the booth. Bass looked worried, but Styx smiled. He's fine, Bass. We just set some ugly truths before him. Give him time to think. Flip you for the check? You're on. The crew was in the middle of the sound check when Haley returned to the arena. She didn't see Don on the bus, and she was worried that she would find him talking on the phone with Morty and Ted. He wasn't in the arena. He was, but she couldn't see him as he sat in the stands in the back on the second level. Ms. Marshall, can you help us get the level set? The sound engineer asked when he saw her arrive. I keep telling you to call me Haley, Chris. The tour's almost over. What can I do? The keyboards aren't right. Can you play something? You know, kind of bang it out like you do in the middle of the show. Haley hopped up onto the stage and sat down on her stool. She spun around once and then reached out for the electric piano. She closed her eyes and then began to play. It was a ragtime riff that started slow and quiet, and then gradually she began to pound on the keys, really rocking out. Styx and Bass wandered into the arena and heard the music. Styx looked at Bass. Bass nodded and they raced to the stage. With a quick leap, Bass was on stage and pulling his bass strap around himself. Haley smiled as she heard the familiar backbeat filling in behind her. She looked up and nodded to Bass, who smiled in return. Styx took a couple of bars to catch on to the rhythm, and then he joined in as well, filling in with a driving percussion rhythm. The roadies all stopped what they were doing and watched as the trio smiled and played. No one noticed as Don got up out of his seat and walked slowly toward the stage. Styx ended the jam with a flourish and the roadies started clapping. The clapping died out except for one pair of hands. Don walked up to the stage, still clapping. Don ignored Haley and walked over to Bass. He held his hand out, and when Wes grabbed it, Don pulled him to his chest and hugged him. "I'm sorry, Wes. Thanks for being a friend and putting up with me." "No sweat, Axel," Wes replied as Don released him. Don apologized to Styx as well, and then he turned to the center of the stage and walked out to where his microphone was. "Is this one on, Chris?" "It is now, Axel." Don smiled. "Thanks, Chris," he said into the microphone. And then he turned to the right and the left. "And thanks to all of you guys and gals on the road crew. You've done a terrific job once again. We're going to rock the house down tonight, thanks to your hard work. But before we get on toward that, I have a few things I need to say to all of you." Don paused for a moment and motioned everyone to gather around him. "First off, I want to apologize to all of you. I haven't been the easiest guy to deal with on this leg of the tour. I've been distracted and I haven't been at my best. Well, not tonight. Tonight we end this tour with what I hope will be our best show to date." The crew clapped enthusiastically. Don motioned for quiet. "To my bandmates, I'm sorry I haven't been at my best, and I've made you look bad as well. Not tonight. Tonight we rock." There was more applause and a few rim shots from Styx. "Most of all, I want to thank our lovely keyboard player, Haley Marshall. She's been a trooper throughout this tour, her first big national tour. She has never failed to show up and play her heart out. She's proven how good this band can be when we have a solid hand at the keyboards and a friend on the stage. John was never both. Haley is. Haley, I'm sorry for earlier. You were right. Thank you for having the balls to tell me that I was screwing up." Don walked through the crew to where Haley sat stunned on her stool. He stopped in front of her. "I said some things I shouldn't have earlier. I hope you forgive me." Haley smiled and stood. The crew clapped as they kissed. "Enough of that mushy stuff," Styx said into his mic. "We have another hour before we have to clear the hall. Let's rock this place." Don nodded as one of the roadies handed him his Les Paul. Styx started clapping out a rhythm with his sticks, and the band leapt in. 3/4 of the way through the show, Don surprised everyone. They had just finished one song, and Don turned and walked back to Haley. He pushed her microphone aside and yelled, "Start playing the riff you did this afternoon in the sound check." "What?" "Trust me," Don said as he walked away. Bass was standing next to the drum kit when Axel reached them. "We're just going to jam for a bit," Don said as Haley began. He turned back toward the front of the stage. "Okay, Atlanta, this is our last show for the tour. We're going to try something a little different for a bit." He turned off the mic and began to jam with the rest of the band. For 20 minutes, the foursome played off the initial riff, improvising leads, solos, and rhythms, until Don heard what he had hoped to hear. He looked at Haley and ran his finger across his throat. Styx was pounding out the rhythm to a very popular song. Bass recognized it and began to add to it. Axel played the signature riff, and he could see the recognition in Haley's eyes as he stepped up to the microphone and began to sing Pretty Woman. The crowd loved it. They roared with approval as the song ended, and the band went on with the rest of the show. When the show was over, Don hurried back to the bus. Haley looked around for him, and when she didn't see him, she wandered over and chatted with Styx and Bass. Haley started to turn away from Styx, and he grabbed her arm, keeping her back to the door. He could see Don coming through the door. Don was carrying a dozen roses. When he was right behind Haley, Don nodded to Styx, who promptly let go of her arm. "I'm going to go see if I can find Axel," Haley said. "You won't have to look far," Bass chuckled. Haley turned around to find a bouquet of roses thrust into her face. "What do you say, guys? Is Haley the best keyboard player we've played with?" Don asked. "Without a doubt," Styx replied. Haley took the roses and held them to her nose, inhaling their fragrance. "Haley Marshall, we'd like you to join the band permanently," Don said. Styx and Bass agreed. "I accept," Haley said, "and I'll stay as long as we have fun. I really enjoyed the show tonight, especially that jam session." Everyone agreed that the jam session needed to be a part of all of their future show. And then it was time to go back to life in Central City. For 2 weeks after the Atlanta show, Don struggled to get back to life at home. His days were filled with phone calls and negotiations. Cassie and Jenna kept him grounded with their chatter at the dinner table and their general enthusiasm. Lindsay and Walt were busy kindling their romance, which meant that Jenna was spending a lot of time at Don's house. February came to a close with negotiations between Barry Rift and John West finally, resulting in an agreement that both sides could accept. It was Friday night, and Don watched as Jenna and Cassie went out. He opened the paper searching for something to occupy his time now that the band's legal problems were solved. He hadn't seen Haley in the 2 weeks since they'd been back. He talked to her on the phone several times, but he had kept her at arm's length while dealing with John. An ad in the entertainment section caught his eye. Monster, featuring Haley Marshall, was playing at one of the popular dance bars, McGarrity's. Don knew she was playing with Monster, and he encouraged it. 30 minutes later, Don walked into McGarrity's. He sat down at the bar as he watched the members of Monster setting things up. The bartender brought him a draft and stood next to him. The girls can really rock too, the bartender said, blatantly admiring the tight leather pants that both Jane Perkins and Lee Hanks were wearing. Both were bent over connecting cords into power strips. Don had to agree that those were some first-class backsides. Not nearly as nice as the one in the blue jeans bending over near the keyboards, however, Don realized. He stared for a bit, realizing that for the first time in a long time, there was no pang of regret when he thought of another woman. With the legal mess mostly straightened out, he finally had time to give to a woman. He decided it was time for him and Haley to go out and see if that spark was more than a spark. He smiled at the bartender and told him to grab another beer. He was going to talk to the band. "Don't waste your time, mister," the bartender said. "They're either married or lesies." Don smiled to himself and headed for the stage. "Need a hand, ladies?" Don said to the backs of the 5 working women. "We can handle things just fine, cowboy," Jane Perkins said without turning around. "Well, if you're sure you aren't interested in having an experienced guitar player help out," Don replied. "I'll just go on back to the bar and drool like a good Neanderthal." "No need to be nasty, cowboy," Jane said, finally looking up. "Oh shit." The other 4 looked up. "Axel," Haley shrieked, launching herself at him. Don caught her and returned the hug. "Hello, Haley. Damn, you look good." He paused and then added, "Feel good, too." He grabbed a handful of her backside. "No fondling the keyboard players," Lee Hanks said, smiling and holding out her hand. "It's good to see you again, Axel." Cassidy and Selena both hugged him after Haley turned him loose. "How's the kid doing, Cassidy?" Axel asked. "He seems to like rock and roll," Cassidy replied. "Sorry about the attitude, Axel," Jane said, shaking Don's hand. "You wouldn't believe the number of guys who want to help us out." "I might actually." "So what are you doing here, Axel?" Jane asked. "I was bored and decided to come see my favorite keyboard player, and maybe steal her away for a little conversation later." "You were just joking about helping out, then?" "Not necessarily." Jane looked at her bandmates. Don watched as they all nodded. "Maybe you'd like to sit in for a couple of numbers?" Jane offered. "I don't want to horn in on your fun," Don said, in case the offer was only half-hearted. "I think it would be great," Lee said, grinning. "Me too," Selena added. The other 4 looked at Haley. Haley looked back and forth between Don and her bandmates. Don held his hands up. "I don't want to be a problem, ladies. I'll play, but only if it doesn't disrupt things." Jane looked at Haley. "What do you think, Haley? We'd have to rework some of the sets to do things that Axel might know, but it should be fun." "I'm all for it." Jane looked serious again. "Did you bring an Axel?" "I have my Les Paul in the pickup." Haley hugged him again and then said, "Well, don't just stand there, cowboy. Go get your Axel." Don smiled and headed back to the bar. "Whatever the ladies want is on me," he said, tossing a credit card at the surprised bartender before heading out the door. He stopped at the door and turned back. "Do you want me to bring my Marshall stack in, Jane?" Jane jumped up and hurried across the room. She linked arms with him, and the two headed out the door. "Better watch her, Haley. I think she might have a case of Axel envy," Lee hollered across the stage. "She's your girlfriend, not mine," Haley retorted. Before long, the stage was set up. Axel found a booth for them to sit down in. The conversation was upbeat and fun. Monster wasn't due to start playing until 8, but he could tell that the ladies were about to jump out of the booth with excitement. "How much music do you have ready to play?" Don asked. Jane looked puzzled, but Haley answered, "We've got enough to play for 4 or 5 hours. Why? Think anyone would mind if we started early?" Don asked. Haley smiled, recognizing that her band mates were chomping at the bit to play. "I doubt it. Are you sure you want to play with us all night?" Don smirked and raised his eyebrow, but before he could say anything, Jane broke out laughing. Lee smiled and said, "He's a guy, Haley. Playing with the 5 of us all night would be a fantasy come true." Don smiled and agreed. Haley groaned and shook her head. "Be careful what you say, girlfriend," Lee replied. "And how you say it," Selena chimed in. "Let's just go play some music," Cassidy said, heading for the stage. Monster Plus One played for nearly 5 hours to an amazed but packed house at McGarrity's. By the time midnight rolled around, Don was really tired. He'd forgotten what it was like to tote his Axel for that long. Everyone in the band was having fun. "One more?" Lee asked. Everyone nodded. "Last song," she said into the microphone. "So you might want to grab your partner for this one." Lee moved up beside Don. "Sing this one with Haley, Axel." I put the words next to the monitor during the last break. Who knows, it might ignite something. Don stared down at the monitor. He didn't know the music to the song, but he recognized it. He smiled as he unfastened the strap and set the Les Paul down on its stand. Haley started singing, "Is Love So Fragile?" Don waited through the first and second verse and joined in for the chorus. "Lovers forever, face to face. My city or mountains. Stay with me, stay. I need you to love me. I need you today." Haley soloed with, "Give to me your leather. Take from me, my lace." Don watched as the crowd swayed with the music. He could feel the connection the song was building between Haley and his heart. The sparks flew as they sang the words that seemed to come right from the heart. Finally, the song ended with Haley softly singing, "Give to me your leather, take from me. My lace, take from me. My lace, take from me, my lace." The crowd erupted with applause. Don turned to salute Haley and caught the blush that seemed to start at the open collar of her shirt. She was positively glowing. His eyes registered even as the lump in his throat grew to the size of a softball. "Anyone for ice cream?" Don asked as they packed the last of the equipment into their trucks and the monster trailer. Cassidy declined. Her fiancé Bruce was there, and they were headed home. Lee and Jane were too. Selena looked at Haley and decided to decline. "Are you sure, Selena?" Haley asked. "Go. I'll just be in the way." Haley hugged her and headed for Don's truck. "Looks like it's just you and me, cowboy," she said as she stepped past him and into his truck. Don pulled into a Baskin-Robbins parking lot not far away. Before he could park, Haley put her hand on his arm. "I have some Ben & Jerry's at my place, Don. I thought we would go on a few dates before I got to come up to your place, Haley. We've had 5 months to get to know each other, Don. I won't try to lure you into my bed. I just thought maybe we could get to know each other a little better someplace a little less public. I'm not ready to be on the cover of the tabloids just yet." The ride to Haley's apartment was quiet, with Don growing more nervous by the minute. When they arrived, they slipped quietly up the stairs and into her cozy one-bedroom space. Just as Don had imagined, it was neat and thoughtfully decorated, every detail in its place. Haley led him to the kitchen, setting down 2 bowls of Cherry Garcia ice cream on the counter. She pulled up a bar stool and took her seat across from Don. "Cherry Garcia is my favorite," Haley said, smiling as she took her first bite. Don nodded, his nerves starting to settle. He watched as she enjoyed the ice cream, her movements slow and focused. Then a bit of it slipped down her chin. Without thinking, Don reached over and wiped it off. Before he could pull his hand back, Haley playfully grabbed a napkin and helped him clean his own chin after he dripped a little himself. "Oh sure," Don joked, "I help you out, and all I get is laughter." Haley smirked. "What did you want me to do, get the napkin first?" "Now that's a good idea," he chuckled. They shared a quiet laugh, the mood light and warm. The room filled with a gentle kind of tension, not heavy or uncomfortable, but charged with something new, uncertainty, maybe curiosity. With a grin, Don scooped up a bite of his ice cream and offered it to her across the counter. Without breaking eye contact, Haley leaned forward and took it, smiling as she finished. She scooped her last bite and held it out to him. As Don leaned in, she purposely missed, smearing a little ice cream down his cheek. His eyes widened in surprise while Haley burst out laughing. She quickly stood and dabbed the mess off his face with a napkin. Don turned on his stool, smiling, and wrapped her in a warm embrace. Their eyes met again, and for a long moment, everything felt still. He held her gently, her hands resting on his shoulders, both silently appreciating the comfort they found in each other. He gently moved his hands up her back, offering a steady, reassuring touch. Haley's hands mirrored his, brushing across his back and up to his neck in quiet affection. They broke the embrace for a breath, their foreheads touching as they held each other's gaze. "I think it's time we continue this talk somewhere more private," Haley whispered with a smile. Don nodded silently. Haley turned and took his hand, leading him with quiet determination, her grip firm as if afraid to let him go. At the bedroom door, she paused to speak, but Don gently leaned in, placing a soft kiss on her lips before she could finish. They stood close, the door slowly opening behind her as they held each other with quiet intensity. He stepped inside with her, their hands still intertwined. "Are you sure about this?" Don asked gently. "Yes," she replied with certainty. She took a deep breath, and instead of words, offered a peaceful smile. They sat side by side on the bed, still holding hands, the air thick with the weight of emotion and the comfort of trust. The rest of the evening unfolded in quiet conversation and long, peaceful silence. Two people, both carrying burdens from the past, finally finding a space where they could simply be. Don woke with a jolt. His eyes flew open, and it took him a moment to remember why he wasn't in his own bed. This was Haley's room. He turned his head. Yes, definitely Haley's. A small smile crept across his face as he saw her sleeping peacefully beside him, her arm draped across his chest, gently anchoring him in place. As if sensing his movement, Haley's eyes slowly fluttered open. Good morning, Dawn whispered. Oh wow, so it wasn't a dream, Haley said, stretching and drawing her arm back with a yawn. Dawn chuckled softly. Nope, definitely real. Haley gave him a sheepish smile. I can't believe everything that happened yesterday. It all feels like a whirlwind. He nodded, his tone suddenly thoughtful. Are you okay with how things went? No regrets? She hesitated, then shook her head. Not even a little. I just didn't expect it all to happen so quickly. I'm still trying to take it in. I'm more worried about what you think. I think, Dawn said gently, that you're a wonderful person, thoughtful, strong, full of life, and I wouldn't change a thing about how we got here. Haley met his eyes. Really? Really? If anything, I want more time with you. I want to see where this goes. They sat in silence for a moment, the unspoken feelings hanging gently between them. Dawn leaned in and kissed her forehead, a soft and sincere gesture. What do you want, Haley? He asked. She smiled. I want to see where this goes too. Just then, Haley hopped up from the bed. Hold that thought, she said, rushing to the bathroom with a laugh. Dawn smiled as he watched her disappear around the corner. Eventually, he followed suit, stretching before heading to the bathroom himself. When Dawn returned, Haley was in the kitchen making coffee, wearing one of his shirts. He grinned. I think that shirt looks better on you, he said warmly. Haley laughed over her shoulder. Thanks. Coffee? Sure. Or we could grab breakfast out. Maybe even a quick shower first? That sounds nice, she replied, but Dawn noticed a slight hesitation. But? He prompted gently, joining her at the counter. Haley sat down quietly, her fingers wrapped around a warm mug. The bowls from the previous night still sat on the counter, forgotten amid all that had happened. Having second thoughts? Dawn asked softly, sitting across from her. She stared into her coffee for a long moment, then nodded slightly. Let me guess, Dawn said. You're worried I'll change my mind now that we're close. That I'll walk away? Haley nodded again, visibly trying to find the words. If anything, Dawn said, I feel even closer to you now. You're not just someone I admire, you're someone I genuinely care about. I want to know where this could go. She looked up, eyes filled with emotion. That's the thing, Dawn. I already know. I'm in love with you. And I don't know if I can handle it if you're not feeling the same. Dawn reached across the counter, gently taking her hand. Then let's find out together. One step at a time. I won't lie to you, Haley. I don't want to ever hurt you, but I won't tell you I'm in love with you if I'm not sure. I did that with Crystal. I won't ever do that again. But I don't want you to push me away. I'll never find out if you do that. Haley's eyes were moist as she looked at him. She nodded. Dawn sighed. I guess I should head home. I think we need some time to think. I'll see you tomorrow for rehearsal, right? Haley nodded. Why don't you run back to your room and put something else on so I can have my shirt back? Then I'll get out of your hair. Haley shook her head. She reached down and pulled his t-shirt off and handed it to him. She stood there as he pulled it over his head. You are so beautiful, Haley. Last night was. Haley put a finger over his lips. She kissed him softly and then opened the door for him. Last night was a fantasy come true, Haley said. I'll call you tonight. You better. So tell me again why I'm taking you to McGarrity's to get your car? I never told you in the first place, Lee, Haley said, smiling at her friend's blatant attempt to pry. Well, okay, fine. I made a mistake last night, and this morning I panicked and basically rushed on out of my place before the topic of picking up the car even came up. I doubt it was that bad, girl. And even if you made a mistake, it's not the end of the world. You've got a happy glow today, something I haven't seen on you in a long time. Maybe, but what do I do now? I got way ahead of myself before we even had a real date. So, you were honest about your feelings from the start. That's not necessarily bad, right? Yeah, but nothing. You learned early on that you two get along. How is that a bad thing? It's much worse to realize later that you connect in every way except the important ones. True, but he didn't say he loved me. In fact, he said he wasn't sure. He's probably going to pull away, just like Michael did. Don is not Michael, Haley. Michael was bad news, and you know it. You didn't like Michael because he was so, stubborn. I didn't like Michael because he didn't respect boundaries and was always chasing after the next thing while stringing you along. Oh, please. Take those blinders off, Haley. Michael dumped you. He did it because he found some other fish to reel in. It wasn't because there was anything wrong with you. He said he couldn't go through life with a frigid wife. Since when does a frigid woman become a total 304 and have a satisfied glow on her face the next morning? If I were betting, I'd bet that you came hard at least once last night. That ought to show you that Michael was wrong about at least one thing. Okay, you're right. And for the record, it was at least 5 times last night. Go, girl. You have nothing to worry about, sister. If you came 5 times last night, Don is probably trying to figure out how to make it happen again tonight. I did make him promise to call later. Shit, girl. You got his attention. Go get the rest of him. He's just as smitten as you are. He just doesn't know it yet. After she picked up her car, Haley decided that Lee was right. She needed to go spend time with Don, preferably out of bed. He didn't answer his cell phone, so she called his house. Cassie said he was off at the practice space. Haley could hear voices as she entered the building. You sold me out, Axel. I rolled over for you, and you sold me out. Now you are going to pay. A voice she didn't recognize said. What are you talking about, John? Dawn replied. It was John Key West that was with Dawn. This can't be good, Haley thought as she reached for the door handle. Oh, come on, Axel. You turned your pet News 304 onto someone. Crystal was never smart enough to ferret that stuff out. I think you seriously underestimate Crystal, John. She's not just another pretty face. Yeah, I know. She can suck-start a Harley too. So what? She's still just another dumb blonde like that dumb you got playing keyboards. Don't start in on Haley, John. She's better than you'll ever be. Yeah, and I'm sure she gets you off too. She's still just another dumb. Get lost, John. I get that you aren't happy with whatever story Crystal's writing, but you cut the ties with us. You did it publicly, and you held us hostage for 6 months until you got everything you could drain from us. Well, no more. Your life and your music are what you've made them. Go stew in the soup. Haley took a deep breath and opened the door. Well, here's the dumb now. Am I interrupting your afternoon delight, Axel? John said sarcastically. Dawn stared at John. Haley could see the anger boiling up in his face. It's not worth it, Dawn, she said. He's not worth it. Dawn nodded. You're right, Haley. He hugged her tight. It's good to see you. Please, John said from the doorway. You two make me sick. I'm out of here, but remember this, Axel. If I go down, I'll take you down with me. Enjoy your dumb. Haley had heard enough. She walked up to the door and pushed it closed before John West could get through it. You really are a piece of work, Mr. West. I can't believe I idolized you for years. Hell, I even bought into the crap you used to spread about you being the heart and soul of Barry Rift. Now I know that you were Barry Rift's a-hole. All the crap came through you. John turned and stared at Haley. Dawn could see his fist clenching. Go ahead, big man. Show the dumb just how much of a man you are. Hit me. Come on, you know you want to. Dawn couldn't believe what he was hearing. He started forward, but he was too late. John swung. Haley caught John's fist in her hand. John stared at her. Now are you going to turn tail like a good little a-hole, or do I turn you into a eunuch? Haley asked, still holding his fist in her hand. This ain't over, bitch, John hissed. Oh, yes it is, little man. You better think hard about whom you call bitch. The next person might just decide to show you who the bitch really is. Now get the hell out of here, a-hole. John opened the door and slipped out just as soon as she let go of his fist. Wow. Remind me not to piss you off, Dawn said as he put his hand on Haley's shoulder. Don't you start, Mr. Whitson. Dawn looked confused, and then Haley smiled and wrapped herself around him, hugging him tightly. Dawn held her closely for quite a while. Haley took a deep breath and pushed herself away from him. We need to talk, Dawn, Haley said softly. When Dawn nodded, she continued, I'm sorry about this morning. I panicked. We had a terrific time last night, Dawn finished for her. I hope it can happen again, Haley. But I don't have any expectations. Last night happened because everything was right. We both felt it. And if it doesn't happen again for a while, that's okay too. Just don't say it will never happen again. That's all I ask. Haley nodded, closing the door behind them. She pulled Dawn over to the chairs along the wall of the practice space. I need to talk to you about something. I need to explain what happened this morning. You don't have to. Yes, I do, Haley interrupted. Lee helped me understand some things I hadn't realized when she took me to get my car this morning. So sit down, shut up, and listen. Dawn chuckled, sitting in one of the chairs. Yes, ma'am. That's better. Haley smiled, then sat next to him. So here's the thing. Dawn raised an eyebrow, prompting her to continue. Go ahead. Well, it's Haley hesitated. Dawn smiled, teasing, spit it out, Haley. You had this all worked out a few minutes ago, right? Yeah, I did, but that was when I was talking to Lee. She knew Michael and how he was. Michael? My ex-fiancé. I dated him for about a year. We were engaged. He broke up with me around this time last year. Okay. Anyway, Michael was always difficult to deal with, especially when it came to working with the band. He was particularly tough on Lee and Jane, because they were closer to each other than to him. Exactly. One day, something happened between him and Lee. I still don't know what. She never talks about it, and he always denied anything happened. Eventually, he broke things off, saying he didn't want to marry someone who didn't meet his idea of a real partner. His words were harsh and hurtful. Either he was completely wrong, or there was something I wasn't seeing in myself. Haley. Lee hinted at the same thing once. I think I let Michael's negativity get into my head more than I should have. I panicked because he always claimed people only want temporary connections, but settle down with someone who fits a specific mold. My dad used to say the same thing. Last night threw me off. I felt like I stepped way outside my usual self, but at the same time, I haven't felt that happy in a long time. Don't ever change because of me, Haley. I like you for who you are. I don't know about the rest of the guys, but I sure wouldn't mind last night happening again and again. Besides, giving yourself completely to one person is not what I think of as a casual fling. A casual fling is when someone gives themselves to anyone and everyone. I can't see you doing that. Oh God, no? So we have that settled? Don asked. Haley nodded. I was going to work on some songs, but... No buts, Haley. I'll try not to change for you, and I don't want you to change for me. Now, show me what you've got, Buster. Don wiggled his eyebrows. Haley laughed, turning a little pink, and threw her arms around his neck. God, I have to learn to watch what I say, Don joked. He quickly kissed her on the lips and stood. Keyboards, dumb, he teased, swatting her lightly and guiding her toward her keyboard. You'll pay for that, Axelman, she grinned. I look forward to it, Haley, Don replied with a grin. Now follow this. He began playing his latest composition. 2 weeks later, Don and Wes were tuning their instruments in the practice space, waiting for Charlie and Haley. Don's phone rang, and as he opened it, Styx walked in, carrying a newspaper under his arm. Oh boy, when Keys messes up, he does it big time, Styx said, striding into the practice room. No kidding, Styx, Bass replied, pointing at the paper on his amp. Glad to see you could make it, Styx, Don said with a smile, closing his phone and turning around. Yeah, well, your day is coming, Axel, Styx replied. The trio laughed. Speaking of which, where's our keyboard player? Styx asked, looking directly at Don. She's a bit under the weather, Don replied. That's 3 days in a row now? Something like that. She says she feels better by afternoon, but the next morning, it's bad again. Sounds suspiciously like morning sickness, Styx remarked. Maybe it's Axel's way of dragging these rehearsals out? Bass teased. Ha ha, Don sighed. Not to change the subject or anything, Styx said. What about John's threats to take us down with him? You've got nothing to worry about, Charlie. Everyone knows that Robin keeps you addicted to a legal narcotic, Don said, smiling. Yeah, her, Wes added. What about you and Bass? He's all smoke and mirrors as usual, Charlie, Don said with a chuckle. I've been clean for more than 5 years, Styx, Bass replied. I know I hit the booze a lot on the road, but that's mostly legal. John was really the only one of us doing anything even remotely illegal since Wes stopped partying with him, Don said. Okay, I guess I knew that, Styx sighed, relieved. The rehearsal ended early again, and Don headed home. When he arrived, Cassie was waiting for him with Jenna. Daddy, we need to go shopping, Cassie said, giving him a hug. What are we shopping for now? Don asked. Prom dresses. Aren't you two sophomores? I thought you had to be juniors to go to prom. Well, when you're dating juniors. Okay, Cassie sighed in exasperation. Daddy, it's not like I have formal dresses in my closet. You don't. Don teased. Daddy, she exclaimed. Okay. So who's driving you shopping? Cassie sighed again. We need you to drive, Daddy. We can't drive. Lindsay's at the store until 9. There's no one else. Okay, fine, Don said. Let's go then. For the next 4 hours, Don chauffeured his daughter and her friend to half a dozen dress shops. He sat bored in each one as they tried on dozens of dresses before finally settling on a pair from the first shop. After arranging for the dresses to be altered, Don dropped Jenna off at Lindsay's place and took Cassie home. Daddy, did you really mean it when you said I could talk to you about anything? Cassie asked when they reached the living room. Alarm bells rang in Don's ears as he nodded. Well, I... Cassie faltered. Don could tell she was nervous about whatever was on her mind. Relax, take a deep breath, and sit down, Don said softly, patting the couch beside him. Cassie sat down, crossing her arms. Don frowned, trying not to notice the way she had shifted. Does this have something to do with the prom? Don asked. Well, sort of, Cassie started. You know how my birthday is only a week before the prom, and I'll be 16 then, right? Don nodded. Well, damn, this is hard, Cassie said, frowning and turning to face him fully. I want a special present for my birthday. Let me guess, a car? Not even close, Daddy. I want Bradley to give me something. Then maybe you should have this conversation with Bradley, not me. Cassie sighed and took a deep breath. I want Bradley to make me feel like I'm really growing up after the prom. Don's jaw dropped. This was a conversation he hadn't anticipated. I thought this was your birthday present, not his, Don said, trying to cover his surprise with humor. I guess that depends on how you look at things. Okay, Cassie, are you sure? I mean, you've only been dating Bradley for, what, 5 months? About that. And yes, I'm sure. There's only one other person I've ever dreamed about sharing something important with, and now that's not possible. I know Jessie got you started on the pill before she died. Have you thought about other things, like safety? Bradley would probably kill me for telling you this, but I'll be his first too. Yes, we've already talked about this generally. Don took a deep breath. He knew this conversation was important, and although it made him uncomfortable, he was glad she trusted him enough to share her feelings. Have you given any thought to how and where? Don asked. Not really. Daddy, Bradley doesn't know I'm even thinking about it. I want it to be special for us. Mom always said her first experience with you was something she treasured. She said the right place and time were just as important as the person. Well, I wouldn't recommend the back seat of his car. Cassie laughed. No way. We've already had that discussion. My first time won't be there. Okay, do you have any ideas? I thought about my bed, but I decided that might be a bad idea. If we ever break up, it might remind me of it. So, you were hoping I might help you arrange something, like a hotel room? Cassie smiled. I'll tell you what, I'll think about this for a while. I mean, we do have another month, right? Cassie nodded. Is this plan going to include Jenna? You know? Don laughed. I didn't mean with you and Bradley, but with her and Tommy? No, Jenna's not ready. We already talked about it. Wes and Lindsay are chaperoning the prom. Jenna and Tommy are riding with them. Bradley and I are going separately. He's going to try to get a better car. I'm glad you feel comfortable enough with me to talk about this. I really do appreciate the trust you have in me, Cassie. I love you, Daddy. I know you love me too. They hugged, and Cassie headed to her room to get some homework done. Don was chopping onions with his back to the doorway when Haley slipped into his kitchen. Guess who? She said, putting her hands over his eyes. Miss America? No. Miss July 1999? Get serious, Axelman. The sexiest keyboard player in the world? Closer. Don spun quickly and smiled. Haley. He kissed her long and hard, pinning her backside against the island in the middle of the kitchen. How are you feeling? He asked as they separated, slightly breathless. Better, and yet not so much better. Oh, let's just say that I'm as good as I get this time of the month, and leave it at that. Oh, Don said, hoping he kept the disappointment out of his voice. He had really been looking forward to her spending the night. At least I didn't barf up my breakfast this morning. All things considered, I'm happy. Well, I hope you brought an appetite. It smells good. What is it? Chicken marsala. What can I do to help? Sit over there and look cute. Haley sat down. You need one of those kiss the cook aprons. Don smiled. The pair talked about everything and nothing while dinner cooked, and over dinner. Afterward, Don and Haley sat down on the couch and began watching a movie. It wasn't long before sleep claimed both. Cassie slowly opened the door. The house was quiet. She held onto Bradley's hand and pulled him into the house behind her. Bradley closed the door. Shoo! Cassie hissed when the door made an audible thump as it closed. Sorry. Cassie tiptoed into the living room and then stopped. Bradley nearly knocked her over. Cassie pointed at the couch. Bradley smiled. Don and Haley were slumped together. Haley's head was on his shoulder and his head was against hers. The television was on, but only the end screen of the movie was showing. They were holding hands. They look so cute, Cassie hissed. If they wake up. Shoo. Cassie led Bradley down the hallway and into the game room. She pushed him onto the sofa and climbed onto his lap. Now where were we? She whispered. Bradley pulled her to him, and their lips met in a delightful kiss. Don woke with a start. He thought he'd heard the door open. He looked over at the television. The movie was over. His arm tingled, and he looked down on the sleeping form of his girlfriend. She looked so peaceful. He hated to wake her, but she said she wasn't going to spend the night. Haley, he whispered, gently raising her head off his shoulder. Haley, it's nearly midnight. If you're heading home, you should probably get moving. Yeah, I guess. I wonder if Cassie's home yet. I'd best check. Do you need anything? I need the ladies' room, and then I'll be fine. Don wandered down the hall. Cassie wasn't in her room. He could hear a groan from the game room. Curious, he crept down that hall. A gasp sounded from the game room. Don turned the corner. He froze. Cassie was kissing Bradley. Her coat, shirt, and bra were lying on the sofa beside her. The two were in their own world. Their lips were joined. Don could see that Bradley's hands were moving. Don smiled. Cassie was moaning into her boyfriend's mouth. Don backed off and down the hall a bit. Cassie, are you home? A whispered shit came from the game room. Yeah, Daddy. Bradley and I are in the game room, Cassie yelled. It's almost midnight. I wouldn't want Bradley to miss his curfew. Right, Daddy. Thanks. We'll be right up. Don smiled and headed back to the front of the house. Haley was pulling her coat on. See you in the morning? He asked as he pulled her to him. I'll be there. They were kissing when Cassie and Bradley emerged from the back of the house. Good night, Bradley, Don said, pulling his lips from Haley's. Night, Axel, Bradley said, obviously nervous. See you tomorrow, Bradley, Cassie said, still holding Bradley's hand. Bradley was staring at Don. Well, kiss her already, Don said, turning back to Haley and lowering his lips to hers. Cassie pulled on Bradley's arm and finally, he bent down and kissed her lips too. Bradley and Haley left. So, how long have you been home? Don asked as he locked the front door. Not very long. You should have awakened me. You two looked so cute sleeping there. I couldn't. You were afraid I'd scare Bradley away, right? Cassie's eyes grew wide. A herd of elephants could have run through the game room, and you wouldn't have noticed. Oh my God, you didn't. Well, I did hear some strange noises. And since I wasn't sure you were home, I investigated. Cassie blushed. So, next time, wake me up. Then perhaps neither of us will need to be embarrassed. You don't mind? Better here where you are safe. Off to bed with you. You do have school tomorrow. Good night, Daddy. Cassie hugged Dawn tightly and hurried off down the hall. Dawn was still tuning up when Haley arrived at the practice space. Hey, good looking, he crooned as she walked in. Hi, Dawn. Haley walked over and kissed him. I want to try something today. Oh. Haley walked over to her keyboards and turned them on. Turn that thing off for a moment and listen. Haley began playing a catchy ragtime-influenced tune. After a bit, she began to sing along. It was a catchy tune with a good hook for a chorus, and Dawn couldn't resist singing the chorus the second time around. Wow, Haley, that's good stuff. You should record that. No, Axel. We should record it. You want it to be a Barry Rift song? Is that a problem? Not for me. I like it. It fits our current style. But is that fair to you? I'm part of Barry Rift. I want to be a bigger part. And I think I can be. Okay. As far as I'm concerned, it's a Barry Rift song. Let's run through it and see if I can add some guitar to it. We'll add bass and drums when bass and Sticks get here. The two were jamming to the song when Sticks and bass arrived. Catchy tune. Axel, Sticks said as he headed for his drums. It's Haley's. She wants us to record it. Bass didn't even flinch. I'm in. What key? Which chords? A, bass, Haley said. D, A, E, and C chords. Right, bass said. For beat somewhat ragtime rhythm. Sticks, Dawn suggested. Sticks counted off 4 beats and Haley and Axel started playing. Bass came in after a couple of bars. The foursome played variations of the song for the next 2 hours. Finally, they seemed to be happy with it, and Dawn pulled the Les Paul off his shoulder. I think that's it, he said. I like it, especially with Haley singing and you doubling the chorus, Sticks said. It could be our next single. Wouldn't that set the music world on its ear? Bass replied. I can hear John now, Sticks added. John's opinion doesn't matter, Charlie, Dawn said. Haley's, however. Yeah, Sticks turned and looked at Haley. How do you like what we came up with? Be honest. We're all friends here. It's better than I'd hoped. Do you really think it could be a single? Haley gushed. Absolutely. Okay, for more, and we're ready for the studio, Bass reminded everyone. Sticks and Bass said goodbye and headed off. It's perfect, Haley. Are you sure you don't mind? I don't want. Dawn smiled and pulled her into him and kissed her soundly. Just one more thing to love about you. Haley, he whispered. Your place or mine? Sailor, Haley said, pulling on his hand. I thought. We both have towels and warm soapy water. Dawn nodded. Your place is closer. They decided to leave her car at the practice space and drove off in his truck. Haley slid over to sit close beside him on the wide bench seat, keeping a hand on his leg for most of the ride. Dawn could sense the tension, a mix of nerves and anticipation. Keep that up and we're gonna crash, Dawn muttered, trying to focus on the road. Just drive, Dawn, Haley replied, her voice low but steady. As soon as they pulled into the driveway, Haley was out of the truck in a flash, pulling Dawn with her. He caught her in an embrace, briefly pressing her back against the truck before she nudged him away. Inside, she whispered. Haley fumbled with her keys, dropping them twice. Dawn chuckled softly, stepping forward to help each time. When she finally managed to unlock the door, she swung it open with urgency, and they stepped inside. He closed the door behind them as Haley tugged him farther into the house. There was a raw energy between them, but Haley gently pulled away and headed toward the bathroom. Dawn followed. You okay? Haley gave a quick nod, clearly flustered. Yeah, just need a second. Dawn turned on the shower and stepped out of his shoes, letting the water heat up. Haley joined him a moment later, her expression softer now. The steam rose around them as they quietly stood beneath the water. Dawn gently ran his fingers through her hair, lathering shampoo, and Haley closed her eyes, letting herself breathe for the first time all day. It wasn't about anything physical, it was about comfort, release, and safety. He helped rinse her hair, then handed her the soap. She offered a grateful smile, took the cloth from his hands, and said, I've got it from here. Dawn stepped out and dried off as she finished. A few minutes later, she emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel, refreshed and calmer. She dressed quickly and returned to the kitchen where he sat waiting. That was nice, she said simply, pouring herself a glass of water. Yeah, Dawn replied, giving her a soft smile. Definitely needed that. They sat in silence for a beat before Haley spoke again. So she began, eyes on her glass. So, Dawn prompted. I just need to know where this is going. Dawn looked puzzled. Where what's going? This. Us, she said more firmly now. Am I just someone convenient? Or is there something real here? Dawn leaned back, caught off guard. He hadn't expected this. I don't know, Haley. I like what we have time together, time apart. It's been good. You're incredible, fun, and we make great music together. Haley's face fell slightly. That wasn't what she wanted to hear. I want more, Dawn, she said. I want something lasting, love, commitment, all of it. I thought maybe that could happen with you. But if you don't feel the same way. Dawn sighed. He hadn't meant to hurt her. But he also wasn't sure he could offer what she was asking for. Dawn didn't say a word. He wasn't sure how to answer that. I think you'd best leave now, Dawn. I don't know what to say, Haley. Don't say anything, then. Go home. Take care of Cassie. Take a few days. Think about what it is you want. Because I don't think I can go on like this much longer. I need more. I need to know that I mean more than just a quick roll in the hay. Or the shower. Dawn frowned. He could see the tears forming in Haley's eyes. He felt his heart lurch. He hadn't meant to hurt her. Okay, he said softly. I'll be at practice in the morning, Haley said as she followed him to the door. Dawn could see that she was hoping he wouldn't take that dream from her as well. Good. I guess I'll see you then. She closed the door as soon as he was through it. Dawn walked away sadly. How did things get so messed up, he wondered. Hi, Daddy, Cassie said as she opened the patio door. I wondered where you were hiding. Dawn turned around and smiled at his daughter. Just out here thinking. Well, don't hurt yourself, Cassie joked. Are you still coming to Bradley's game tonight? I guess. Why? Well, I was kinda hoping I could go with Bradley after the game. Some of the team goes to Tricasso's after. That's fine. You do remember that it's only Wednesday, and you have school tomorrow, right? Yes, Daddy. We'll be out late, but not so late that I can't get out of bed and go to school. Okay then. I'll get dinner started. You get homework started. Deal. Dawn only half watched the game. For some reason it felt strange sitting there watching his daughter's boyfriend play basketball. Something was missing. He looked over at Cassie. She could barely stay in her seat. Bradley started and played well. Cassie yelled encouragement most of the first half. No, it wasn't Cassie that was out of place. Why didn't it feel right? He knew Jessie could no longer be with them at times like this. Maybe that was what he was missing. Sharing this with her? And what about Haley? He wondered how she fit in this. He knew he was being selfish hoping to have her as a, what did she call it? Sex buddy forever. She deserved more than that. She was a partner in his music. He was pretty sure she wanted to be a partner in more than that. Is that what he wanted? He had one wife, his one true love. That's all you get, right? Was he lucky enough to find two women who could be that for him? If he was honest with himself, he wasn't sure. He liked spending time with Haley. She fit in with him so well. Their passion for each other was amazing. And the sex that followed along with that passion was incredible. He took a deep breath. Was it as good as it was with Jessie? Was it better? Halftime came with no answers. Dawn looked at the scoreboard. Bradley's team was ahead. The second half was just like the first. Dawn barely paid any attention to the game. Why did life have to be so complicated? Cassie kissed his cheek and bounced away happily. Bradley's team had won. She was off to wait outside the locker room for her boyfriend. Dawn drove home alone. His thoughts were still jumbled when he arrived. There was another car in the driveway when he got home. Haley's car. He stared at it for a moment. Where was she? She wasn't waiting on the patio or in her car. She did have a key. The side door was unlocked, and Dawn wandered in. Haley wasn't in the house. The outdoor light was on, so he opened the door to the deck. Haley was standing against the rail. She turned and smiled softly. I hope you don't mind that I let myself in. No, of course not. We need to talk, Dawn. He nodded, stepped onto the deck, and closed the door. Dawn turned back toward Haley after he closed the door. I'm sorry, Dawn, Haley said softly. I didn't mean to come on so strong this morning, especially not after the shower. Just need to know where we are going. I mean, what we have is nice, but it's not enough. Not enough for me, anyway. I need more. I'm not sure I said that very well this morning. Okay, Dawn said. So, I was hoping we could talk about what you want. I mean what you want us to be. Dawn turned and walked to the side of the deck and took a deep breath. I don't know what I want, Haley. Well, that's not quite true. I want to make music with Barry Rift, and that includes you. I want you. I want to spend time with you. And it's not just the sex. The sex is great all by itself, but I like being around you. You're my friend, my partner in music. Dawn looked at Haley, who nodded her head. She took the few steps between them and put her hand on his arm as he stared out into the darkness. Dawn turned and really looked at Haley. I know what I don't want, too. I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to not see you except when we are making music. Haley nodded again. I've thought about nothing since you dropped this on me this morning, Haley. If I'm really honest, I'm not sure I've ever truly had a relationship with a woman. What Jessie and I had was a fairy tale, both the original high school romance and our short marriage. I'm sure I was in love with her, and I will always have a place in my heart for her. But we were together for 2 years, with 15 years off in the middle. I'm not sure that counts as a relationship. Susan Turner can't be called much more than a one-night stand, even if we were together for 2 months. Even when I was with Crystal, it was mostly convenience. She got what she wanted, and she slept with me to get it. It was easy and comfortable, at least until the end. So you see, Haley, I'm not sure I know how to have more than we have now. Haley smiled sadly. I'm not that much better than you at relationships, Dawn. I mean, I lost my virginity to the boy my parents wanted me to marry. He was brutal and vicious, and I stayed with him for nearly 3 years. Then I come here, and Michael spends 6 months trying to get in my pants and breaks up with me when it becomes obvious that he's not going to get there. And I top it off by jumping into bed with one of my band mates before we even go on a date. Don't sell yourself so short, Haley, Dawn said as he grasped her hands between his. You were right about Michael. If you doubt it, just talk to Jane again. You're smart, you're sexy, you are fun to be with and talented as all get out in and out of bed. You are everything I've ever wanted in a woman. And mostly, I'm afraid you are going to wake up one morning and realize that I'm just Axel Woodson, a 2-bit guitar player, because that's really all I've ever been. And you deserve so much more than that. Now who's selling himself short? Haley asked as she held on to his hands, keeping him from pulling away from her. You are a terrific father. Your relationship with Cassie is amazing, especially when you consider how short a time you've actually spent with her. I know you didn't go to college, but you're a smart guy. You understand the music business. You are good with people, even ones you don't particularly like. Now that the Mutual Admiration Society has had its say, Dawn joked. Where does that leave us? Haley smiled. Is there in U.S.? I'd like there to be in U.S., Dawn said, nodding. Haley could see the unspoken question in his eyes. She let him off the hook. Me too. Dawn visibly relaxed. But that doesn't mean I stop wanting more. No way. You are not off the hook. Yet, Buster. You are on notice. I want more, and you need to decide if you can provide that or not. I'm willing to wait a while for you to find out, but I am not waiting forever. Dawn nodded. He pulled on Haley's arms, and she came willingly into his arms. The passion in her kiss was unmistakable. Dawn could feel it in his toes. He was out of breath when their lips slowly parted. I should go, Haley said softly. I'll see you tomorrow. Sweet dreams, Haley, Dawn said as he watched her slip from his arms and through the door. Dawn was standing out on the deck staring into the darkness when he heard the door open again. Daddy? Dawn turned. Cassie stood in the doorway. Hi, Cassie, how was the date? Not over yet, she said softly. Bradley and I are going to the game room. Is his curfew still midnight? Yes. I'll holler down about 15 minutes before that, then. Cassie walked over to him and stretched up on her toes. Thanks, Daddy. You're the best. Be careful and be safe. We will, Daddy. Dawn watched her slip into the house. Bradley was waiting nervously. Cassie took his hand, and they headed down to the game room. Dawn couldn't sleep and finally gave up around 4. He left Cassie a note and headed to the practice space. He loved the peace that came when he just played. All of the swirling thoughts that kept him awake were gone as his fingers wandered up and down the fretboard. Notes and rhythms didn't matter. Only the soothing calmness within him mattered. Eventually his fingers began to tire. He was surprised to see that it was after 7 when he stopped. He carefully set the acoustic on its stand and gathered his keys. He stopped at his usual pancake house and sat down. He was hungry. He was tired and he was alone. He knew that 2 of those were easily handled. He would have the 2 scrambled eggs and a short stack. That would kill off the hunger. He'd go home and sleep would claim him as soon as he hit the bed. The lonely part he knew he could solve too. He was tired of the lonely part. He was always waking up alone. Even when he was with Crystal, he woke up feeling alone. The only time he hadn't felt alone was when Jesse was with him. No, that wasn't right. He didn't feel alone when Barry Rift was on the road this last time. Sure, he slept alone, but as soon as he got up, he was with Styx and Bass and Haley and the crew. And these last few weeks, he was not quite so alone. But was it love? Was it permanent? How could he know? How does anyone know? He and Jesse thought they were permanent and in love. The cancer canceled out the first, and his heartache let him know that the second was still true. Breakfast came and Don ate it quickly. He paid the bill and headed back toward home. He pulled out his cell phone. Charlie, I'm not going to make practice today. Can we meet for lunch? No. I'm fine, just tired. I'm headed for bed. Yeah, Garrett's at noon? Okay, see you then. 20 minutes later, he was in dreamland. Where's Axel? Walt asked. He had been waiting at the door to the practice space when Styx showed up. In bed, Charlie replied. Haley too? Styx shrugged. Didn't say. He called about an hour ago. I decided not to stop practice. If nothing else, you and I can work on some of things. Hi, Styx, Bass, Haley said, breezing into the practice space. She looked around and then back at Styx. Where's Axel? In bed. Oh, he called Styx a while ago. He was just turning in. Looks like he was here earlier, though. Bass said, pointing at the whiteboard. Don had left some cryptic notes on the board. Is that some kind of shorthand you guys use? Haley asked. Looks mostly like gibberish, Charlie replied. As long as we're here, we might as well play, Bass suggested. The other two nodded and started playing. Styx looked at the wall clock and set his sticks down. It's time for me to get. Where's he off to so quick? Haley asked Bass. I have no clue. I'm gonna go see my lady. Lock up when you leave, Haley. Haley nodded and sat down staring at the board. Don sat in a booth at Garrett's staring at the menu, even though he knew it by heart. You look beat, Axel, Charlie said, sliding into the booth. I am. I can't sleep. Charlie quirked his eyebrow, but didn't say anything. He knew Don had something on his mind, and that he would tell Charlie when it was time. How did you know Robin was the one? Charlie stared at Don for a moment. She told me. Don chuckled. No, really. Haley sort of gave me an ultimatum yesterday. She wants more than what we have going right now. I don't know what to do. I mean, when she's not around, I feel lonely. When we're together, things are just so good, but I don't know if it will be like this forever. Do you love her? I don't know. I think so, but it doesn't feel like it did with Jesse. And it's only been 7 months since Jesse died. Only you and Haley can decide if it's right, Don. I've seen you two together. You look like a couple in love, but I don't see the private times. I can't see into your heart or hers. All I can tell you is that you are worthy of her, and she is worthy of you. You are good together. You need to decide if that is enough. Their sandwiches came, and they ate silently. Don paid the bill, and they walked out together. Thanks for coming, Charlie. I really appreciate it. Glad I could help, Don. The two hugged and left to go their separate ways. Don parked in the driveway and pulled his phone out. Haley, it's me, Don. Can you come over, please? I need to talk to you some more. Haley pulled up to Axel's place. His truck wasn't in the driveway. She sat and waited for a while. He'd called and asked her to meet him here. She dialed his cell phone. No answer. With a sigh, she got out and headed into the house. Axel? No reply. Haley checked the kitchen, his bedroom, the deck, and the game room. Still nothing. A strange feeling settled over her. She tried calling his phone again. Still no answer. She glanced around the game room once more and noticed the sleek black baby grand piano in the corner. With a small shrug, she thought, guess I'll wait a while. Before long, Haley was completely absorbed in the music. Her fingers moved smoothly across the keys, bringing one gentle melody after another to life. The music, as always, calmed her. Her anxious thoughts faded as she lost herself in the rhythm and sound. Whose car is that, Cassie? It's not your dad's. Not unless he bought one today. The two kids entered quietly. The strains of a piano melody drifted up from the game room. Cassie smiled. It's probably Haley, she said. Why don't you fix us something to drink? I'll be back up in a bit. Bradley nodded as his girlfriend headed down the hallway. Cassie looked around the door and saw Haley. She'd seen that look before. Haley was lost in her music. Cassie smiled. Just like Dad, she thought, walking into the room. Cassie leaned against the piano and listened for a bit. Haley finally looked up and stopped playing. Hi, Cassie. I didn't hear you come in. You wouldn't have heard a herd of elephants, Cassie said, smiling. Yeah, you're probably right. I do get lost in the music sometimes. What were you playing? It sounded nice. I was just doodling with something that Don left on the board this morning. Have you seen him? Not today. He left around 4. There was a note on the fridge when I got up. He called me an hour or so and asked me to meet him here. He wasn't here when I got here. Cassie nodded. So what are you up to this afternoon, Cassie? Haley asked. Bradley and I were going to study. Cassie blushed. Yeah, right. Anatomy, right? Haley winked. Cassie blushed again. And I blew the privacy thing, right? Cassie frowned and nodded. Sorry. That's okay. The pair were silent for a moment. Cassie broke the silence nervously. So what's up with you and Dad? What do you mean, Cassie? I mean, Dad's been acting odd the last couple of days. Not sleeping, not really there even when he is. You know, really distracted. I know the thing with Key West is basically over and you guys are rocking like nobody's business, so it can't be the band. Doesn't really leave much, you know? I guess. I mean, I know it's none of my business what goes on between you two, but I'm a little worried. Haley sat back and thought for a moment. Well, Cassie, I'm not sure what is up with us, to be honest. I think that's the problem. I kinda lowered the boom on Don the other day. Cassie smiled. I wondered about that. Haley looked at Cassie. How do you feel about us? Don and me, I mean. I think it's cool. And if we were to get married or something. Or something. Oh, you mean like move in with us? I don't think that will happen. Oh, I don't think Don will want to live in with you here, Cassie. Why not? It's not like I don't know you two are doing it. Haley quirked her eyebrow. Well, you are, right? Haley smiled. Maybe. Cassie giggled. Right. Well, at least not while you are around. Haley replied, giggling too. It's okay. I don't mind, really. I think it would be great if you two got married or something. I'm not going to replace your mother, Cassie. I know I could never do that. Probably not, but you could be my cool older sister. Haley smiled. I think I'd like that. Cassie hugged Haley. Bradley sat at the kitchen counter with 2 glasses of Coke, feeling a bit anxious. The piano music from downstairs had stopped, and he could hear voices from the game room, but he couldn't make out what was being said. His worry grew with every passing minute. The front door opened, and Don stepped inside. Bradley quickly stood up. "Hello, Bradley. What's going on?" Don asked. "Hi, Axel." Cassie went downstairs. "Someone was playing the piano when we got here, and they've been talking ever since. I take it that Haley showing up threw off your plans for the afternoon?" Don said with a knowing smile. Bradley looked down at his shoes, feeling awkward. "Relax, Bradley," Don said, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to be embarrassed about wanting to spend time with Cassie. I know what's going on, and I'm fine with it. Now, have you decided on a birthday present for her?" Bradley nodded. "I think it's all set. Do you need anything from me? Money?" "No, sir. It's a simple plan. I hope she'll like it." "Good. I don't need the details, just let me know when she'll be home. I'm trusting you to treat her with respect. That's fair, right?" "Yes, sir. I was also hoping you wouldn't mind if Cassie stayed out with me after prom. We'd be back by lunch the next day, if that's okay." "All right," Don agreed. "Just make sure one of you calls me that night to check in." "Of course," Bradley said, relieved. Noticing how quiet it had gotten downstairs, Don said, "Maybe we should go find our friends." "I think that's a good idea, Axel. And thanks." Don patted Bradley's shoulder, and they headed down to the game room. When they turned the corner, they saw Haley and Cassie hugging tightly. "This can't be good," Don joked loud enough for them to hear. "And what would you know about it, Don?" Haley teased as she moved to Don's side. Don pulled Haley into a warm hug. He smiled and gave Bradley a look, nodding toward Cassie. Bradley understood and went over to greet her, the two exchanging a happy hug. Don gently led Haley out of the game room and onto the deck. "You know those two are probably having a deep talk right now," Haley said once the door was closed behind them. "I sure hope so," Don said with a chuckle. Haley gave him a questioning look. "I trust Bradley to treat Cassie well," Don explained. "And I'd rather they have a safe, comfortable place to spend time together than somewhere they shouldn't be." Haley nodded thoughtfully. "Does it bother you that I feel that way?" Don asked. "No, not really. It's just different from how my dad handled things." "I'd like to think it's better," Don said. "I trust Cassie, and she trusts me. I probably know more about her life than your father ever did about yours." "Of that, I have no doubt," Haley agreed, leaning against the railing. They stood there for a moment before Don took a deep breath. "What is it?" Haley asked. Taking another breath, Don gently took Haley's hand. "I tried to think of something clever to say, but nothing felt right," he admitted. "So I'll just say it plainly. Haley Marshall, will you be my partner, my best friend, and my wife?" Haley looked down to see a beautiful ring in Don's trembling hand. Tears welled in her eyes as she smiled and leaned up to kiss him softly. "Yes," she whispered. Don slipped the ring onto her finger, his face lighting up with joy. "It's beautiful," Haley said, brushing away a tear. "So are you," Don smiled warmly. "You're sure about this?" Haley asked, still a little breathless. "I'm more sure every minute," Don said. Haley hugged him tightly. "You were wrong about one thing," she said. It was both romantic and sincere. Then she kissed him again, the future bright ahead of them. The next 2 weeks went by in a blur of activity for Don and Haley. There were dates to choose and people to see, and when the 2 weeks ended, Don sat back and sighed. His first marriage hadn't been such a hassle. But the smile on Haley's face when some part of her dream could be accomplished was worth every minute. And so it was that Don found himself on the couch idly sipping at a bottle of beer. Haley was in the bedroom with Lindsay, Jenna, and Cassie. It was time for the prom. Don was pushed aside at lunchtime. Haley and Lindsay ushered Cassie and Jenna to the beauty salon and then rushed them past Don. Haley kissed him briefly as she headed to the bedroom. Don nursed his beer and listened to some music as he waited to do his one job, photographing the final product. Before that could happen, their dates had to make an appearance. It wasn't long before the doorbell chimed and Don opened it. Walt smiled as he entered. "You remember Jenna's date, Tommy Patterson, Axel?" "Sure," Don replied, offering the boy his hand. "Welcome. You might as well come in and sit." The ladies are still back in Cassie's room. Before Don closed the door, Bradley pulled up in his mother's Buick. He joined the others waiting in the living room. Don hollered back up the hallway that everyone's dates had arrived. Haley was the first to appear. Don smiled. She was still in her blue jeans. Her eyes twinkled as she joined the men. Haley hugged Wes and Bradley and smiled as Walt introduced her to Tommy. Lindsay made her appearance next. She entered the room to a whistle and some catcalls. Her off-the-shoulder blue dress matched Walt's tux perfectly. Wes presented her with a corsage, and they posed for a couple of pictures. Don was about to say something when Tommy gasped. Jenna blushed as she stood in the doorway. Her lavender dress bared one shoulder and flared beautifully at the hips. Don was sure he'd never seen Jenna look this good. He could barely hold the camera still as he snapped her picture. "Damn, girl. It's a good thing I brought my shotgun," Walt said. Tommy stepped forward, and after telling Jenna how beautiful she looked, he nervously pinned a corsage of white orchids on her dress. Don took another few pictures with Tommy and Jenna, and then Tommy, Jenna, Lindsay, and Walt. He took the last one and turned toward the hallway to yell for Cassie. "Jess," he whispered. Cassie looked just like her mother. Her shoulders were the same barely tanned color above her jade green dress. Don snapped a quick picture of just Cassie. Then he stepped close and kissed her cheek. "You look beautiful, princess." "Thanks, Daddy." Bradley pinned her corsage on her and kissed her cheek as well. After another round of pictures in various combinations, Haley pushed Don next to his daughter and took the camera from him. After the flash, Don hugged Cassie. "Are you ready for tonight, princess?" he whispered. Cassie nodded. "If you don't want to go through with anything, call, okay?" Cassie nodded again. "Don't be nervous, Cassie. Just go have a good time." "Thanks, Daddy," Cassie said, smiling. She kissed his cheek and moved off to join Bradley. Everyone said their farewells and left Don standing next to Haley. He sighed and closed the door. "My little girl sure has grown up to be a beautiful woman," Don said softly. "Yes, she has, Don. You've done a terrific job." Don kissed her. "Are you ready to go?" she asked. "Yeah, I guess we'd better. I'm sure Jane will give us no end of crap if we're late." "You better believe it. Where are we playing tonight, anyway, Haley?" "You and Jane have been playing this one close to the vest. We didn't want you to have a chance to back out." "Axel," Haley said softly. "It's a surprise." Haley parked the truck in the spot next to the monster truck. They were behind a huge auditorium. "You can take the blindfold off when we get inside." Jane said everything would be set. "We go on in about 5 minutes." Don nodded and waited for Haley to come guide him into the building. He was tempted to peek, but the consequences of doing so were spelled out quite plainly. He had grown attached to that part of his anatomy and decided not to risk its future. Jane appeared and grabbed Don's other arm. They stepped onto the stage, and Don took off the bandana and looked around. They were behind a thick curtain. Don could hear the buzz of conversation beyond the curtain. The lights dimmed as he fastened his Les Paul strap. He looked down at the set list and smiled. There were more slow songs than fast, not the usual monster fare. There were even a couple of Barry riff tunes, including the unreleased song that Haley had written. It was going to be an interesting night. Someone tapped on a microphone beyond the curtain. "Welcome to Jefferson High's Junior-Senior Prom. I'm sure you are all wondering why the music hasn't started yet." Jefferson High, Don heard. Cassie's school, Cassie's prom. He looked at Haley. She shook her head and mouthed, "Focus." The voice continued. "We have a special treat. I was approached by a couple of former students. They have a band that plays about town. They wanted to play for the prom this year. And they were very persuasive. I remembered how good my proms were with live music, and I agreed. I hope you all enjoy this one." The curtain opened as he said, "Let's welcome Monster +1. The students clapped. Selena clapped out a 4 count, and the music started. Axel joined in as the lights went up. The crowd gasped as the band started to play Barry Riff's latest single, and Axel stepped up to the microphone. Don sang as he looked out into the room for his daughter. He found her and Bradley. They were dancing close to the stage. He could see the smile on her face when Bradley turned her to the stage. Don smiled back, and his music pulled him into that magical zone where everything is just perfect. The band played for a while. Lee stepped up to Axel as he stared down at the set list. The next 5 or 6 songs were slow ones. "You're out for this batch, Axel." Don looked at her. He could see Haley waving at him over Lee's shoulder. "We'll take this set, Don. Why don't you see if you can dance with a few ladies? Maybe ones in green dresses? You don't think she'll mind?" Haley shook her head and pointed off the stage. Don nodded and put his Les Paul down. He walked down the stairs as Jane stepped up to the microphone to sing. He could hear her starting to play the notes to Stairway to Heaven. Cassie and Bradley appeared in front of him. "How's it going?" Don asked them nervously. "Oh, Daddy, how did you know I wanted you to play tonight?" Don smiled. "May I borrow your partner for a bit, Bradley?" Bradley nodded and put Cassie's hand in Don's. Don guided Cassie to the dance floor and began to waltz with her. "I didn't know anything about this, Cassie. Haley dragged me here blindfolded." Cassie nodded and put her head on Don's shoulder. They swayed together until Don heard the words to the last slow verse. He gently guided her back to Bradley. Don kissed her cheek and put her hand in Bradley's and stepped away. Cassie was the center of attention. A dozen girls buzzed around her and Bradley. Don smiled. Cassie had been keeping their relationship quiet. So much for that, he thought as he searched for Jenna. Monster ended Stairway to Heaven with a flourish as Don stepped up beside Tommy Patterson. "May I borrow your date for the next dance?" Don said, tapping Tommy on the shoulder. "I don't think." Tommy started before he could see that it was Don. "Of course, Mr. Woodson," he said when he recognized Don. Don held his hand out to Jenna, and she blushed as she let him pull her onto the dance floor. "Having a good time, Jenna?" he asked as they waltzed. "Yes," she said softly. "It's like a dream come true. How did you know that this was what Cassie wanted?" "I didn't. Haley or Bradley set this up." Jenna smiled and put her head on Don's chest, dancing close. Don took her back to Tommy and went looking for Lindsay. He tapped Wes on the shoulder. Go away, kid, Walt said without looking. Hey, mister, can I dance with your date? Don said softly. Walt spun Lindsay around and started to look angry until he recognized Don. Bring her back in one piece, Axel, he said, bowing and backing away. Don held Lindsay carefully as they waltzed. But Lindsay was having none of that. She snuggled right in just like her daughter had. You made their year, Don, she said softly. Thank you. Not my doing, he said. Haley or Bradley did this. Maybe, but dancing with you was at least as important as you playing at their prom. Don smiled. I hope I told you how beautiful you looked earlier. You did. Thank you. I feel beautiful for the first time in a long time. You and Walt look good together. Are you going to make an honest man out of him? I hope so. He said we have something to do later. He's a good man. Lindsay smiled and put her head back against his chest. Oh, man, you wrinkled the dress. Walt teased when Don brought Lindsay back. I'll pay for the dry cleaning, Don teased back. Can I borrow bass for a number or two? Walt looked at him. As long as it's not the last song, she replied. Don nodded. Don returned to the stage and the band finished out the set. When the last set started, Don stepped up to the microphone. I need to borrow a couple of you from the audience. Walt Brown and Cassie Woodson, if you could join me on stage, please? There was a hushed whisper as Walt kissed Lindsay and approached the stage with Cassie. What are you doing, Axel? Jane asked. Lost Without You is next, right? Jane nodded and then smiled. You and the girls can rest a bit. Haley appeared by his side with two acoustic guitars. She handed one to Walt and one to Cassie. We're going to do Lost Without You, Don said. Cassie blushed, but nodded. Jane pulled a microphone between Walt and Cassie. Haley stepped up beside Don. Before they started, Walt leaned over and whispered in Don's ear. Can I borrow a mic when the song's over? Don nodded. Cassie started strumming. Walt joined in. Don played a soft lead. Don started singing with the other three, joining in for the choruses. Don was amazed. The entire crowd stopped and watched, clapping along with Haley, Jane, Selena, Cassidy, and Lee. Don ended the song with a flourish. The auditorium erupted with shouts and applause. After Don acknowledged the applause, he turned to Walt. It's all yours, bass. Walt handed him the acoustic. Cassie kissed Don's cheek and headed off stage after handing Jane the guitar. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Walt Brown. Axel said that I could borrow the mic for a moment. I'd like to ask your indulgence for a moment. I have a very important question for a certain lovely lady. Walt took a breath and continued. Lindsay Noonan, I love you. Will you marry me? There was a shriek from the floor. Walt stepped down off the stage and walked toward Lindsay, who was being hugged by Cassie and Jenna. Don could see there were tears streaming down Lindsay's face. Walt knelt before Lindsay and held out a small box. Lindsay nodded, and Walt put the ring on her finger. Don turned to the band. You guys still remember the anniversary waltz? It hasn't been that long since we played a wedding, Axel, Jane said, nodding. Walt pulled Lindsay to the center of the floor when the music started. Congratulations, bass, Don said into the microphone. Don sighed as they played the final song. He leaped off the stage at the end and hugged Lindsay and congratulated Walt. He gave Jenna a hug and shook Tommy's hand before heading off to find Cassie. Cassie leapt into her dad's arms and kissed his cheek. Thank you for tonight, Daddy. The night's not over yet, Princess. Are you sure you want to go with Bradley? More than ever. Don watched as his daughter grabbed Bradley's hand, waved and hurried out of the hall. Haley stepped up beside him. Are you okay? Yeah, I think I am. Tonight was a special night. Thank you. Haley smiled and then kissed him hard. We're going to finish loading things, and then I'll be back to take you home, cowboy. Don watched her walk away. Life was good. In another couple of weeks, he would be marrying her. Cassie would be a woman. Walt and Lindsay wouldn't be far behind them on the parade to the altar. And then Barry Rift would be back in the studio. Yep, he thought, a far cry from that flight back to Central City all those months ago. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.